agree with her, which is often, because this is not even an entertainment show. It is about opinion. Like it is meant to be about opinion. It is meant to kind of, and they are meant to kind of go off the rails a little bit with their things. So
it's called The View. They should be allowed to have views.
Yeah, exactly right. So people can, and that's the thing is like I don't participate in boycotts for shows in general because I can say I really dislike it, and I can express myself, in social media and say I disliked what this person said and why I disliked it, and that's just part of the same ability to speak my mind like she has to speak her mind. And ultimately if it's detrimental to the show, you can say you didn't like it, but I wouldn't try to like make her get fired or expect her to apologize for it. So with that, I mean, I think, Joy Behar was just being her typical mean self, Joy Behar, and she did it in her own sort of like snarky way and whatever, you know?
Plus, what Mike Pence has to understand is he has not done himself a lot of favors in the public eye either. Like, just the way he represents himself is very creepy a lot of times, and he's going to draw criticism like
Somebody
that.
Else is having nightmares too.
Speaking of nightmares, by the way, people take a look when you have a chance at a picture of Mike Pence. Find a picture of Eminem and tell me this is Eminem at 60. He looks like Eminem. And I point this out to people, and they're like, what? And then they do it, and the reaction is always like Tanya's like, like instant laughter. Totally. He's Eminem's dad, I think. Let's start that rumor.
I wonder how Pence is as a lyricist and a freestyler.
Yeah. So, but speaking of frightening things, Paranormal State is a show that Tanya has become well acquainted with. While me and Mike are out hitting the movies, she's watching disturbing television.
I don't have to find parking for that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. So tell us, what's up with the show? Where's it at, and what's going on with it?
Well, it's on A&E and also FYI. It's been rerun several times. And Paranormal State is one of many reality shows that has become very popular in the last 10 years or so, of sort of investigating paranormal activity, etc. And the reason I brought it up for this podcast is that has been the whole fascination with the supernatural has been a growing trend for like 30 years. I mean, it's always been there, but in terms of our media and our pop culture, you look back in the 90s with the show Charmed and things like that, people are starting to the resurgence of New Ageism, which was Gnosticism, but getting into spiritualism without any, specific guidance on it. And people are starting to get back into Wicca and all that stuff. I have friends who actually decided to become white witches or wizards or whatever, and I'm like, well, what? And it's become something where it's been desensitized or glorified in a certain sense, where people, if you read from Exorcist, Catholic exorcists, there has been a growing problem of demonic possessions and in houses, and there's a shortage of exorcist priests in the United States, and it has become a phenomenon that is actually really frightening. Now, what's different about Paranormal State, because I try not to watch these two things too much because I'm very sensitive to this. I don't watch horror films because then things visit me for days afterwards. I know Joy Behar would say I was mentally ill, but in the Catholic faith, this is a real thing. So my childhood was like Sixth Sense, just so you all know. Just let's lay that on the table. Right. That, and I don't actually own a gun, but will one day. So the thing is that with Paranormal State, it actually attempts to solve the problem as opposed to agitate and record. Say, see, we've got proof of this. We got proof of this. And part of their mentorship is Father Bob Bailey, who is now becoming more prominent as an American exorcist priest. And on this particular episode is called Two Possessions, and it's two girls in two different states who are being possessed by the same six demons, and the one was actually seemed to be cured for a while, and then it pops up in another case in another state, and then that girl who was originally cured is getting attacked again. And so you actually see the exorcisms on the show, the second one for one child and the first one for another. And I will not name the six demons because you don't want to do that, but they are named on the show. Father Bob Bailey does a lot of prayers on it. I think that's why I don't have problems after seeing this one, both in English and in Latin. And in this show, they're literally, these young girls are getting hurt badly, getting shoved down a laundry chute and trapped. They're getting thrown in the room. And you see a lot of this happening on this particular episode. This is a reality that our Catholic faith is having to deal with. So, what happened was they were not getting, and Mrs. Warren of the famous couple of The Conjuring was there also with the exorcisms, and they were struggling. And what was fascinating about this, and this is something that calls back to that whole mocking that people do about sending thoughts and prayers, is that this the main character, I want to say character, but it's really actually a real person. The leader of the group is this young Catholic man who finally, exhausted of all other options, puts a online request for a global prayer vigil for these families. And they did. They got a huge response of people doing prayers online in response. And after that was done, both families were saved. No more activity, no more threats, no more growling, no more throwing bodies against the walls, none of it. Here's where in this moment, the power of prayer, which is so prominent in our Catholic faith, is now sort of as the counterculture of this popularity of, let's delve into this and do the Ouija board and all this stuff that is getting everybody into trouble. And so I always felt like, with the Catholic faith, you got the better end of all of that stuff, because we had answers to fight it. But isn't it interesting that it took a global prayer vigil to fight these and save these families from more torture and more despair? So that's what's so, when I have friends who are getting interested in the spiritualism and things like that, I'm like, dude, first of all, you're like decades behind me. I've been dealing with this for a long time. But at the same time, my own Catholic faith, which we didn't even know, or I didn't know growing up, has always had answers to deal with this. They just don't advertise it. It's not something you should glorify or go looking for. So with that, to me, it's been very frightening to see everybody kind of like put this into sort of this popular thing where it's okay to play with this. And then we have our Catholic Church saying, hey, this is becoming a growing problem. And, lay people are part of it. This is, I feel like I'm sort of a counterculture. I'm like going, yes, it exists. Yes, I've been asked to go to friends' house to help them exorcise their homes. And this is part of our Catholic faith. But I'd never sit there and go, this is so fascinating. Isn't this wonderful? Isn't this cool? And yet our culture, our pop culture, has tried to make it cool. And that is really dangerous to me.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that right now on HBO, they're showing a lot of a sequel, Ouija something, I don't know, sequel to a minor hit movie about Ouija boards. And I watched for like a minute, then I'm like, because I live in a building that I don't want to say on the air, but it's
it's special.
Yeah, I've had people say, including Tanya, but I actually had even a Lyft driver who was from Israel was like, "Oh my gosh, you live there? It's world famous. Supposedly, it's a very old building, supposedly filled with ghosts." And I'm just like, I'm not even going to mess with this. This place has been blessed with holy water, and I'm not messing with it. But we just have a couple of minutes left. I want to touch on something that we're going to save crashing for next week and really go in big about it then, because we've meant to really dig in 2 weeks in a row now. So we'll really try to go after it next week or promote it next week. But there was, speaking of thoughts and prayers comments, you mentioned something that sparked my thoughts. Chris Pratt of Guardians of the Galaxy fame, he basically, there was like a weird little mini tussle in the media this week about our social media, because Kevin Smith, the film writer-director, had a heart attack and wound up, could have died, he said, basically. And poor Chris Pratt just put in a tweet, my thoughts and prayers are with him, or our thoughts and prayers, along with saying a lot of heartfelt stuff about how he inspired him and inspired his career to start. And people were going, oh, yeah, thoughts and prayers. And it's like, I've said a couple things cracking on politicians that say that over these school shootings and things like that. So I don't think when it comes to policy, whatever side we fall on these things, or when it comes to political issues, if something is really important, of whatever it is, the politician shouldn't just say my thoughts and prayers are there. I think they do require to do something more. That's their job. But when it comes to a guy commenting to his friend and fellow creative, it's like, let it be. And right. Kevin Smith even came forward and defended him. And Pratt's initial tweet said, Kevin, we don't know each other too good, but I've loved you since Clerks. I'm praying my ASS off for you because I believe in the healing power of prayer. He asked his followers to keep joining him in praying. And basically people were, somebody wrote, that's cool and everything, but doctors and nurses save lives, not prayer. And James Gunn, his director, also defended him. Director of Guardians of the Galaxy movie said, there's nothing wrong with sending someone positive thoughts and prayers. When this is coupled with an action, when action will benefit the situation, it's empty. Referring to, okay, attack the politicians maybe, but don't attack an individual. And Kevin Smith wound up saying, poor Chris Pratt, one of my favorite actors on the planet, put up a nice tweet where he's just like, hey man, I don't know you that much, but I love Clerks, I'm praying for you. Apparently people were like, F your prayers, and attacked him and all that. And then James Gunn had to jump in. Smith continued, number one, thanks to Chris Pratt. How sweet was that? Number two, please don't fight over stuff like that. It's a waste of time. Whether you're religious or not, someone saying I'll pray for you, it's good intentions. Mm-hmm. So,
and it's not completely by itself not doing something, as I explained with, the situation. It's just that when you don't have the power to do something, and even if you have the power, there's nothing wrong with also sending thoughts and prayers.
Of course, sure. Yeah.
So, and the thing is that, one of the things I found interesting about this whole, do something. You want somebody to do something your way.
Sure.
It doesn't mean they aren't doing something. It doesn't mean they aren't considering it. It's suddenly a reason everybody's attacking each other. Well, do something. Well, sometimes just doing something is not the best option if you're not thinking through what you're doing.
True.
But to also attack thoughts and prayers or condolences or what have you is not helpful to the global community. You're actually making more disunity, and you're just expressing anger instead of like going, okay, this person is saying a common quippy thing that they probably have some real intention behind, but that is separate from what you expect somebody to do as a politician, and that should be kept separate.
The phrase thoughts and prayers has become a cliche that people associate with politicians failing to do anything about gun regulations. And so I think whenever someone sees the phrase or anything like the phrase, it's almost like a knee-jerk
trigger.
It's like a trigger knee-jerk reaction to it. And then they miss the in this case, I think people really missed the point of what Chris Pratt was trying to do and what his intentions were.
Yeah, exactly.
And and I think that Kevin Smith lives his life how he wants to live it and all that. And I think that it was very. I've been a fan at times, not a fan of everything he's done, but I've been a pretty big fan of some stuff. And and I think that just the look on his face as he talks about this stuff. I have a freeze frame picture in front of me, and he just looks—it's so sad. I mean, the guy really is shaken up and assessing his life. So, my thoughts or prayers with him. That I hope he's comes through this okay, keeps losing weight, and gets through it. So, until next time, folks. This has been Pope Culture. I'm Carl Kozlowski.
I'm Tanya Yarbrough.
And I'm Michael Wally.
Thanks for listening. Bye.